I am aware that we are on air. Welcome to all of those who are listening, and welcome to the Transport and Infrastructure Committee meeting, 18th of October 2023. And I will open with the karakia. Waka takatiho kiti uru. Pakataka tiho ti tonga. Kia makina ki uta. Kia matara ki tai. Ia I a ki ana. Ti aka. Akaru. Here tio, here huka. Here ho hu. Te he moriora. Thank you. I'll ask for apologies. Any apologies that we currently have? Councillor Miller. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Sophie and Malcolm. All in favour, say that carried. Right. Any identification of any extraordinary business? I have none. Conflicts of interest, apart from the normal conflicts of interest, I have not got any registered. Public forum, there is no public forum today. Terms of reference, amended to include Ms. Megan Mackay. Can I have I'm going to ask for, because the terms of reference have been altered, can I have a mover and a seconder for altering those? Thanks, Malcolm. Seconder, Shane.
Yes.
All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, none, carried. Right, we have confirmation of the public minutes from the last meeting. Are there any corrections to those minutes before I put them? No corrections listed. Can I have a mover and a seconder for those minutes, please? Sam? Seconder, Nicole? All in favour say aye. Those against? None, carried. Public actions. Oh, sorry, before I go there, what I'd like to do is, are there any matters arising from those minutes that anyone would like to bring forward before I go to public minutes? Public actions? No? Right, public actions, an update. We have on today's report, Perryman's Road consultation closure. We have to be confirmed operational surface water in Hororata, and we also have for the next meeting infrastructure and transport, Kakaha Park drainage report with regards to come before us. What seems to be missing from the agenda is the chairperson's report.
Would you like to give us a verbal update?
Right. If I can find my notes now, because I had them written down. Chairperson's report. Attended a land drainage meeting on the what was the land drainage meeting? The 8th of oh no, hang on, sorry. I'm a little bit confused here because the chairperson's report should have been on the agenda, and I have to give apologies because I, in putting this agenda together, didn't realise that my report was missing. Meetings attended, the 11th of August, I attended Healthy Streets for Everybody with Lucy Saunders, held by Waka Kotahi. On the 6th of September, there was the Triennial Water Zone Committees establishing the update established under the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, CMS. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank both Councillor Deans and Councillor McGuinness, our representative, on those committees. 13th of September, Al Lorne, Head of Emergency Management, gave councillors a briefing on Emergency Management Bill, which is open for public submission through to the 2nd of November. There was, on the 6th of September, there was Selwyn District Council, there was a speed management briefing. Staff outlined council's draft speed management plan, which is open to consultation, and also on the 2023-2034 long-term plan. There, on the 8th of September, there was the District Land Drainage Committee meeting, and we also had a presentation at that meeting with regards to climate change on operational facilities, and there's going to be a presentation workshop as tab 11 on your agenda today, presented by Aqualink. And what I will do is I will get my hard copy that should have been attached to the agenda circulated, and can I have that attached to the agenda, please? Any queries on my chairperson's report? Can I have a move? I'll move my chairperson's report. Can I have a seconder for that report? Thanks, Bob. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? None. Carried. Right, operational delivery. No, sorry, acting executive director report. I'm jumping guns.
Tēnā koutou katoa. So my report's relatively short and to the point. So I'll just turn to page 24. Got some key things to highlight. As you know, we're working towards the 2024 LTP, and our staff have been working extremely diligently and hard pulling all those budgets in together. So a sort of a shout out for the staff who have just completed that first round of budgeting, which council will have the privilege of seeing a little bit later on this year. Today we've got a number of reports which I think will be of interest to council. Permanence Road, which will be led by Gareth Morgan. We have the PARS report, Outdoor Sports Lighting Policy, by Mark Rikers, and the Prebbleton to City Cycle Commuter Link by UA Lee. And as Deborah mentioned, we've followed through a workshop with Aqualink, Andrew Dark and Nick Dudley Ward, looking at the impacts of climatic cycles and trends on our infrastructure. So I think we've got an interesting agenda coming up. So without further ado, I'll pass back to Deborah and we'll get moving through.
Thank you. So tab 7, page 25352 of your agendas. Thanks, Gareth. This is in regards to Perryman's Road, and the process that I will outlay is that we will have staff actually give a presentation. I have circulated some information to all councillors on questions in relation to this from the agenda, and I'd like a discussion first before we put any recommendations forward, and just for clarity. So if you can start, Gareth, appreciate it.
Thank you, Deborah. Good afternoon, councillors. The previous report on Perryman's Road, as we all know, lays on the table currently, and this report is an update to that previous. I'll take that report, this report and the previous one as being read, but we'll just take the opportunity to briefly talk through the options presented for the intersection of Perryman's Road and State Highway 75. Before I do, as it may be asked during the conversation, at no time through the review process has the ceiling of Perryman's Road been challenged. We've clearly communicated to everyone involved that the decision has been made by council. It will be happening. The question before us is simply the future form that the intersection will take. Following the Safe System audit review and the involvement from Waka Kotahi, we have presented in the report 4 options. Since writing the report, we have managed to get some very high level costings of each of those options, but I do stress with some caution that without knowing what the final direction and outcome gets recommended from council, we can't round those options out. So they're purely indicative at this point. So take them as rough order of costs. In terms of the options, I'll briefly go through them, and I will start in reverse order for obvious reasons that will become clear. Option number 4, to leave the intersection as is with unrestricted traffic movements to State Highway 75. To deliver this, we would have insufficient budget. The indication is this is around 375k to deliver. As it is recommended in the report, the road needs to be widened. Widening it will bring spatial challenges. We've got power poles to the north of the current unsealed section of Perryman's Road, and we've got the river to the south side of it. The option itself has safety concerns, not only for motorized traffic and the right turn issues on the state highway, but also to current active recreational users of Perryman's Road, which is council's designated walking and cycling pathway link between Lincoln and Taitapu. Option 3, left in, left out. This has come out in the report as a consideration. It's the most expensive option, coming in at around 440k, largely due to more extensive interface work at the state highway, and the cost, simply the cost of temporary traffic management on state highway, which, you know, it's rather expensive associated with this. There is space constraints within the state highway to install physical infrastructure to control right-hand turn movements, and we would be relying wholly on signage to control right turn movements, and signage is, you know, people's compliance with that sign. One other thing I'd mention is in the left in, left out is achievable, but left in presents some logical challenges and questions. Effectively, what we're saying, or what a left in turn says, traffic would travel through the Taitapu township along the state highway, only to pass the left-hand turn of the main Lincoln to Taitapu road to choose to turn into Perryman's Road 50 meters later. There's some logic around that, which is questionable. Option 2, left out only. This is coming in at around 340k, which is slightly over budget, but again, I stress, noting of course that final designs and the actual content of delivering this option has not been tested until we know the direction. So there's likely to be room within that. It does provide some spatial constraints in the state highway, though we do believe through good design and consideration, it is achievable. The option does improve safety outcomes on the state highway, as it interfaces and the interface eliminates those right-hand turn movements. It does not require road widening, and it still provides a direct exit access for the residents of Perryman's Road to the state highway. Option number 1, which was the option presented and recommended in the original report, and which we recommend again, is the lowest option, which is closure. It's the lowest cost option of all, which is on budget. It's the safest option of all. As commented in with the Safe Systems audit, there is a concern around those right-hand turn movements off the state highway and nose to tail risk that they present. And as commented and captured in the report from Waka Kotahi, their view is simply having one intersection rather than 2 simplifies the road layout and removes confusion around any right-hand turn movements. So in conclusion, those are the options, councillors. I'm aware there'll be obviously a conversation. We have recommended closure as in alignment with the original report, but happy to take questions and further discussion on this.
Okay. Elizabeth.
Thanks for that report. Probably my biggest query here is, after reading that report, is what about the agricultural machinery that needs to get in to access Perrimans Road? Because they can't utilise the bridge. I mean, that report's come back saying that that's just not going to be probable. So they're going to have to go all the way into Lincoln to access the road from the other end, to then drive all the way up to this end of Perrimans Road.
In the report and the conversation with the safety review, the bridge, Ryan's Bridge that links, it is questionable whether it is wide enough currently for a lot of agricultural equipment. It is got a very low rail to the side of it, and some of it will be able to traffic across. But depending on how we close the end of Perrimans Road, there may still be a pathway in special situations under traffic management control to be able to access in those one-offs into there. That's something that needs to be considered further, for sure.
Okay. Lydia.
Thanks. I just didn't pick up what the budget on option 1 was.
The budget council has assigned is $330,000.
30. Thank you. And I just know with option 4 and reading the report with the widening, it says widening or reduce speed. Would there still be insufficient budget if we didn't widen the road and actually just reduce the speed? As I note in our speed management plan, Taitapu Road is 50 and Perrimans is 80. And so, you know, when we talk about network consistency, if we could bring speed down, seal the road and not widen it, would that bring us under budget? And yeah, I guess I've just got some questions around closing the road, and we're encouraging more people to cross the bridge if they're walking or cycling, and the danger that that brings and the pinch points there for that. And I also have concerns around the agricultural machinery, but not just that, it's more around the articulated HT vehicles, and that the Taitapu Road would be particularly difficult to navigate with an articulated vehicle. Yeah, thanks.
Probably easier in reverse. Taitapu Road is the road that most of the vehicles use currently. In terms of the walking and cycling, we have taken on board the advice, and that needs to be revisited. We will not put in the shared pathway and deposit walkers and cyclists at the state highway. That probably needs to be revisited from the Ryan's Bridge portion towards Taitapu. The only other option I suppose, without having to go through the design process, is to cross Ryan's Bridge and go down the side of the main road. There's more space there to do it. It would seem logical to do it anyway along there. In terms of the speed question, can we just reduce the speed limit? Go remember that report was produced purely from a safe systems audit perspective. It's not being produced from a practical infrastructure perspective. The road is currently at its maximum width, 5 meters wide, and if we seal it, keep it 5 meters for a two-way road accessing a state highway, it's just simply too narrow with the traffic and the rat run that we would create by doing that.
Malcolm.
Yeah. Well, this particular piece of road has been batting around this council at annual plans and things for many years, and many people have wanted to see the dust nuisance sorted. I'm looking at the actual number of users of the road, and on the bottom of page, whatever it is, after 4.7, there's not a lot of users. I have had some conversations with somebody further down the road who are concerned that it will turn into a rat run. And they live in a lifestyle block further down where they quite enjoy the fact that it is a bit of a back road. You did make comment before, Morgan, that with the movement of agricultural vehicles, there may well be the opportunity for them to be able to open the road to go down there. How would that be facilitated?
Standing joke between Mr. Rhodes and myself. Facial expression says it all. It's something we've got to work through, Malcolm. We realise that there's agricultural machinery and equipment that needs to potentially access down there. We don't have a desire to force that to go all the way down to Lincoln and then all the way back up Perryman's Road, a 10K trip to we will work with that through the design. Not all agricultural equipment will not get over Ryan's Bridge. A very large majority of it will. Anyone that's travelled down Perryman's Road, and I'm a frequent user myself of Perryman's Road virtually on a daily basis, often see a lot of agricultural equipment and the agricultural activity crossing the bridge because they'd rather use the sealed road than an unsealed road to get across.
Right.
We just have to work through that with the options and design process with whoever is at the end block. I think it's only one
Yes, Maggie.
block at the end there. Yeah.
So what I'm sort of envisaging is that there could be some form of gate that may well be able to be opened on application or with authorization to allow articulated vehicles or large agricultural machinery, which would be going through there in its seasonal use.
I'm not sure about gate. One of the things that has been discussed is, if you either close it or even left in, left out, whatever variation that is, it's likely to take the form of a low curb block. So, normal motorized traffic would not drive over it. Whereas some more machinery type vehicle with larger, wider, softer tires would have the capability to drive over it under controlled conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Phil. It's gone off.
Yeah, sorry, my
Sorry,
was going off.
it's come up the other way.
That's right.
Okay, Sophie.
I was just going to say thank you very much for the report, and it's really good to have the backing of that safety systems audit as well, because as you've said, and Malcolm's mentioned it, this has come back and forth through council for a long time, and it's picked up a lot of emotive stuff as opposed to data, and also the townships changed, the use of the road, the highways changed, machinery has changed. So I guess the only other bit I would add is it's good to know the relative costs of these different things, because we often spend quite a bit of time debating how much money we should spend on things and saying that we need to be prudent. And then suddenly we're looking at some options that are adding several $100,000 to a road that is used by less than 100 people. So I'm happy with option one, especially if there's some way of potentially designing in an option for larger vehicles that can't get across the bridge. Thank you.
Phil.
Yeah, thank you for the having the safety audit done. For me, that pretty much puts the whole matter to bed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the safest option is to close the road. That's correct.
That's correct. In pure safety, the safest option.
The safety audit says that. Correct.
Waka Kotahi say that the safety audits say you need to restrict right-hand movements out of Perryman's Road.
So Waka Kotahi is indicating to us that the safest thing to do to keep people alive and reduce crash is to close the road. Thank you.
Shane.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Tēnā rā tātou. Thank you very much, Gareth, and thank you very much, Phil. Closure of a road that for safety concerns that eliminates anybody getting killed, I think is a pretty broad brush to paint, especially as you just said that a left-in turn is still an option that can be considered, and we've also heard that the council is supportive of that. I want to thank yourself, the chair, and the council for consideration around this particular item of significant interest. Gareth, option 4 do nothing we can't afford to. Is that what you said? Could you just clarify that?
Yes,
We can't
that's
afford-
correct.
Yep. Option 3, do something as the most expensive and the most logical. Left in unless you live on that road. Option 2, I've written here use of complementary to full seal. So the preferred option here, which is 1 actually, no, but left out only. I've written that use of complementary seal, but your preferred option being option 1 to close the intersection. What consideration has been given to full sealing of that road? Should it be only used for the purpose of horses and cyclists? Will you reduce the amount of seal that's needed on that road? And as has already been discussed here, we've got the practicality issues. You've mentioned that it's a safe systems analysis, so basically a desktop, and we've heard the practical users come in and present to us based on their safety concerns with large machinery that in the report our current access to on that particular bridge is potentially restricted. I think what I'm trying to get to here is that potentially there's a 4th or 5th solution here that incorporates a bit of each of them, that still allows for the use of and the prudent expenditure on seal, and that potentially is that left out only. Is that something that would be permissible around the table, or is it to be considered?
Option 2.
Well, just to break down some of your questions there, councillor. In terms of the left end of the road, the desirement for left in residents, we're talking 1 residence. That can still residential come in and go and access. They probably 450 meters to Ryan's Bridge. That's what we're talking about. In terms of the cost of seal, if we closed it, yes, you're quite right. There has been conversation that the engineered quality of the seal doesn't, if the road was closed, we would still seal it and continue with council's commitment to seal the road for dust purposes, but it won't, we could get away with not the extensive number of coats engineered seal that we would put on a main arterial link. We just simply don't need to do it. It's not the traffic to do that.
And to that point, there would be no traffic because you wouldn't drive up to a dead end road, would you?
There would be traffic. There'd be residential traffic to and from the people that do live at the end there. But limited traffic, yeah, of course.
Megan.
Kia ora. It's a topic that's, I can see from the reports that have been around for 10 years, but I've been here 10 minutes. So acknowledge that. But in those 10 minutes I've been here, last week we talked about road safety, and this week we're talking about road safety again. And that's great that these are actually the topics that we're talking about as a council. The report was really good, and what I found most useful is where you indicated the engagement with the community of the 39 engagements that took place. 28 did not oppose the closure, 1 had no opinion, and 10 said some opposition, but not about different levels of opposition. The most compelling part of this report for me was the explanation about the rear end collisions and why that would be more severe in this particular area. So that's on page 54. I use this network, so I found that really helpful to hear from. And from my perspective, I prefer option 1, what's been recommended.
Yeah, just 10 minutes. It's been around 20 years plus. Councillor Lyle was correct. There have been 3 previous representations to council of the future of this intersection. This has probably been the most robust one.
Okay. Anybody else? Elizabeth, I'll give you one more chart.
Thank you.
And
My lucky day. Just quickly, obviously the big thing here is the agricultural machinery. Otherwise, it's a no-brainer to close. So going forward, are you able to engage with some of the local contractors and find a solution that actually going to benefit everyone? Because I think that's probably going to be the safest option going forward, is making sure that we can actually see that that's accounted for.
Sure. I mean, that's the one sticking point in all of this. You're quite correct. I mean, when you look at something on the pure basis of road safety, it's simple outcome, close the road. But that causes some issues for the one operating farm at the end of the road there that accesses off of the state highway with their machinery, and that access, by the way, is a right-hand turn. The person that presented to us in the public forum the last time quite clearly stated that. So they would have to be under some sort of traffic control conditions anyway, because he would be doing a right-hand turn, whether we closed it, left out, left in, whatever. He's right-hand turn. So yeah, we have to work through that. And the motivation is not to make life difficult for somebody to participate in their business. This is a paper which, just mentioned to Megan's been around for 20 years. Waka Kotahi has wanted it closed on 3 previous occasions. And yeah, it's 50 meters away from the main road. So 2 intersections serving the same purpose.
Okay. Right, as chair, I've listened to the debate. And reading the report, and given that it was an independent report that was actually written, I have some sympathy with those that actually support a left-hand turn out with regards to Perryman's Road. And I'm going to test the meeting, and I'm going to move an amendment to the report that the Transport and Infrastructure Committee receives the report Perryman's Road and approves a left-hand turn at the intersection of Perryman's Road at State Highway 75 Taitapu for Perryman's Road sealing project. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yep.
Okay, Councillor Epihar. Given that that also is in the report quite clearly a safe option, may not be for Waka Kotahi, but they didn't submit to us an independent report. This is an independent report from traffic management that has all the data in front of them and all the process that they have assessed. And I am quite happy with the independent report. There's only 5,000K difference with regards to the cost of, as I understand it, option 1 was 335 and option 2 was 340, and that would probably require some signage. So in light of that, I'm going to move the amendment, and I'm going to ask everybody to vote on the amendment. Those in favour say aye. Please raise your hands.
Point of order, Madam Chair. You have to allow, it's an amendment, you have to allow us to speak on that amendment.
Okay, sorry.
I believe Phil wants to speak.
Oh, sorry, I didn't miss that. Okay, Phil.
I'd like to speak against the amendment in the strongest possible terms that I can. You're asking this council through that amendment, Madam Chair, to ignore the safety of our community. You're asking us to ignore professionals in that field who are telling us that it's unsafe to do what you're suggesting in that amendment. And I think that we as a council, if we adopt that amendment, we'll be taking on, not only as a council, but personally, the responsibility of any harm and death that happens at that intersection for no reason. I strongly do not support your amendment.
It's fine.
It's left-hand turn out, isn't it?
It's left-hand turn out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's option 2. So it's left-hand turn out only. Thank you for that. Elizabeth.
I personally prefer for it to come back to council after seeing what the solutions are that would facilitate the agricultural machinery, because I think that might give us more options about in regards to widening road and speed limits and all the rest of it. So I would prefer for that to be my option.
So just to clarify with regards to that, are you prepared to put that on the table as a further amendment?
Yes.
And given that that's a further amendment, is there a seconder for that further amendment? That further amendment lapses for a.
Sorry, I'll just
Okay.
kind of step in.
Stack them up.
Yeah, briefly, just to cover that matter quickly first. The road won't be designed for right-hand turns in. So if heavy vehicles on a limited basis want to do that, there's going to be a traffic management plan or some sort of specific intervention required to do that. So
And
that
that
would.
sorry, Murray, that could be a generic traffic management plan that they would operate annually, I would imagine.
So we're not
Wouldn't be a case by case basis.
Yeah, so we're not designing a special heavy vehicle bypass over this system. So that if the road is to be closed, it will be closed, and then a special traffic management plan will have to be implemented and approved for heavy vehicles to cross over that.
Correct, because what I'm hearing from the conversation is specifically not for heavy vehicles. It is for agricultural vehicles, which are a completely different type of setup, load distribution, wheel distribution, tire, etc.
Well, in fair,
Sorry, I think the point being is that if any traffic management plan is operational and will be dealt with by the operational teams, and there's no need to bring an operational management plan for the movement of agricultural vehicles. So that is very much operational, will be dealt with that. And in terms of, I think you've already satisfied yourself, Madam Chair, that the Councillor Munt's proposal to put forward has not been supported.
it's not been supported, but it's important that she was prepared to move it. And that's why I have asked for a seconder, so it's recorded in the minutes with regards to process. So that further amendment is lapsed. Discussion still with regards to the amendment on the table with the option 2 with left-hand turn out. Who's next? Sophie or Lydia? Sorry, Lydia.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I still sit in this really hard space here, as I don't think that we should be closing it. A note above the options, it says, as previously discussed, there is little evidence or crash data currently available to support the closing of the intersection in its own right. So that makes me think, are we closing something that has no safety issues currently standing?
Yeah,
but we're worried about what might happen.
I think one of the points that Gareth mentioned was that we may not have that crash evidence at this point, but what happens when we seal the road will increase the traffic along it, which will then have the increased risk of future crashes.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, Sophie.
Yep, that was basically what I was going to say, that the reports that we've got so far are based on the current state. We are changing the state quite considerably by sealing the road, and we're not going to not seal the road. The other point is, just as Gareth keeps mentioning, this is the point of the vehicles in question that we seem to be worried about are a very few number of large agricultural vehicles. The majority can use Ryan's Bridge. It would be great if we can accommodate the bigger ones somehow. And if we can't, yes, they might have to take a long way around, but they are limited in number, very few trips per year, limited number of properties that they visit. It's a shame, but it's still more valuable to us to protect the lives of people on State Highway 75 and within Taitapu, to my mind.
Can I just, I think it's in the safety report, forgive me, I didn't make specific reference to it, that the data suggests that the right-hand turn as you come down State Highway 75 into Taitapu, the right-hand turn you pass, you're already in the 50 zone, and the speed data captured shows that the average traveling speed is very high at around 65 kilometers an hour. Still at that point, people haven't slowed down. And that's why they refer to nose to tail risk.
Okay. Right, Shane.
I just wanted to quickly point out that you've asked a question here, Deborah, around option 2. Left out turn only at the staff's opinion that option 2 is safe.
It's safer.
Sam.
So as you put this motion after this discussion, if it
Yes,
fails,
this is the original motion will go after this motion. So if this motion is lost, then we will revert back to the other motion. So that's the process.
so I guess just for clarity of the meeting, there was no initial motion. No one had moved or seconded anything until you moved this as the substantive motion for this debate. So any further, if this is lost,
Yes.
then that doesn't mean we're not doing the project. It means that someone else will need to move
Sorry.
one of the other
Yeah,
options as presented in the paper or something else as well.
Yes, sorry. So I'm going to put the current motion, which is approves the left-hand turn out at Perryman's Road, which is option 2. Intersection of Perryman's Road at State Highway 75 for the Perryman's Road ceiling. Those in favour, raise their hand. Do you want your vote recorded?
Yes.
Okay, I'll ask for a division. So that's Shane Epiha, Councillor Lydia Glidden, Elizabeth Munt and Councillor Deborah Hassan. Those against, raise their hand. Do you want your votes recorded? Yeah, division. So we'll go Nicole Reid, Bob Mugford, Sam Broughton, Phil Dean, Malcolm Lyle, Megan Mackay, Sophie McGuinness. Okay, so that's recorded. And I declare that motion lost. Now we will revert back to ask them for a mover and a seconder for the original motion that Perryman's Road be closed. Sophie, Phil, all in favour that all in favour that Perryman's Road be closed. Say aye. Those against? No. Okay, would you like a division? Oh, no. No, would you like your votes recorded? Sorry. Okay, so that's Lydia and Shane. Right. Okay. All in favour say aye. Carried. Sorry, I'm doing it again. I'm slipping up. So basically, Perryman's Road will be closed and we'll go on to the next item. Oh, sorry, the division. So Councillor Munt wants to be edited. They just want it recorded that they voted against. Okay, so that's Councillor Munt, Epiha and Glidden. Okay. Right, thanks very much for your report.
Thanks very much.
Now we'll move on to asset management, sports lighting on council reserves. I think that's Mark Rikus.
Tēnā koutou katoa. This report is on sports lighting on council reserves. We did a presentation to the committee workshop on 21st of June. So most people here will have been socialised with the report and the policy document and prioritised work programme. The objective of this report is to seek, firstly, to just receive the sports lighting on council reserves report that I think have been circulated previously, and seeking adoption of the outdoors, or a recommendation for adoption on the outdoor sports lighting policy. And thirdly, supporting consideration of a prioritised program, which is attached to the report for consideration as part of the long-term plan process 24-34. Just a little bit of background. I mean, sports lighting, it's been an issue. It's been raised a number of times through various long-term plan and annual plan processes over the last few years. And the previous council actually asked us to have a look into this in more depth and come up with some ideas and something to guide the process going forward. So that's where the policy has come from, and as well as a pretty comprehensive report that covers all of the aspects of sports lighting. I think in terms of that, we've also looked at a prioritisation process so that we can guide investment decision making going forward for the long-term plan. That's also covered in the report. I don't really have anything more to add to it at this point, but I'm really happy to answer any questions on it. Thank you.
Does anyone want to ask any questions? Thanks. Councillor Lyle.
Yeah, as you mentioned in your report, we've been leading in putting LED installations on sporting fields. I'm very aware of the length of service life of the old metal halide type of fittings we had. Are we achieving greater efficiencies in lamp life, basically, with the LEDs? I believe some of the earlier LEDs gave us some issues. Is the technology keeping up with the hype?
Yeah, as far as we can tell currently, we did have some issues with some of the very early LED installations, but more recently we've had no issues that I'm aware of in terms of some of the more recent lamps and fittings that have been put up. I think overall, let's say the metal halide technology is basically gone. You cannot get replacements for any of those, the old high intensity discharge lighting any longer. So we really, I guess, have to move in that direction of LEDs anyway. And some of the original LEDs the quality of them wasn't that good, but they're certainly improved, I think, in terms of the technology with them as well. And also in terms of the control of some of the blue light and some of those sort of aspects of it as well. So yeah, I think overall in the installations that have been built recently, we haven't had any issues with them.
So, and I'd be thinking that the expectation of level of service from the public, those that have been undertaking sport on the newer well-lit fields, are probably saying, can I have that too?
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of that in terms of, I think if you read the report in depth, there's indication there that a lot of the lighting was actually quite poor standard. So and a lot of that was built by volunteers over a long period of time, cobbled together with old power poles with steel extensions and those sorts of things. And a lot of the lighting was quite poor in terms of and as you'll know, the gas lit lamps, they lose light intensity over a period of time. So it was a bit of a perfect storm, really. We had that with a lot of older systems and changes in trends in terms of utilisation as well. So a move to more night play and an expectation that, that training is done under good, efficient lighting that's safe to use. So that's certainly come through. But there's definitely a little bit of that looking over the fence and saying, well, you've got nice lights, we want those as well. And that's why we need to look at it from a prioritisation point of view, looking at those that are sort of at end of life or conditional safety issues, and also looking at capacity where we need more capacity as well.
Yeah, I certainly support your prioritised work program and the savings on energy consumption as well. And basically, we have to because the old technology is being taken away from us. Thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Hi, I just love page 74. I think that's very, very helpful to have that. I wanted to know if that's going to be made public so that we don't getting asked councillors and council about when it's my turn. 74.
Oh,
Prioritised work program for sports lighting.
interesting. Mine says 75.
Okay.
I know the one you're in.
Yeah.
We know the one.
So on top of that, I wanted to ask, there's been some talk about light dimming and light times, zones, that kind of thing. Do we have the technology or apps on our phones or anything at the moment for those features to be implemented? Have we got them in some of the current new projects that you've put in? When would that look at being a part of the lighting network? Also, is solar options, having solar panels at the top of lighting to try and absorb in some sort of, I don't know, built-in battery packs, is that something that's a part of what's available as well with the technology coming through? Thank you.
In terms of the being able to remote control our lighting, yes, we have already implemented that. So we're using the Musco system, and that enables us to do a number of things in terms of turning off the lights remotely, but also where it's been built in, we can do dimming and those sorts of things as well. So it gives us much better control, and also make sure that we stick within the compliance guidelines for when we can actually have the lighting going. And also in terms of, we don't get those situations where lights get left on, and we've had a few of those previously. In terms of solar, yeah, it's well, of course, solar is dependent on light. A lot of this is during winter months in terms of the use of them. So they haven't really come up with technology that works at this point in time for that level of lighting. It certainly works for, you know, small lighting sources. Yep.
Just on the ability for sports clubs to know about this, the sport and rec team will liaise with all those clubs that are impacted by this and run through the auto prioritisation so that they know when and where and how this is happening.
Just on the when, where and how. This is for LTP consideration. We're not approving the schedule today, so just be mindful of that.
Sophie.
Yeah, just a quick question. So have the estimates for the costs sort of got an allowance in there for inflation, but as you know, Kelvin's pointed out, each time around they're probably going to end up being subject to LTPs anyway. Just wondering.
Yeah, they're based on current costs. So that's based on installations that we've done this year. There's been some adjustments made to those calculations as well. Yeah, you know, as we go forward, inflation is built into the program, but as you say, it's subject to consideration through the long-term plan process, the actual budget part of it.
Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the report. Yeah, the next one. It's good to see the report is inclusive of the celestial dark sky and also mentions Mana Whenua aspirations. Great to see the priority. It's good. It's a priority based around age and or usage. And just a second question around ownership. There is some hazy ownership around I think are we 69% or 63%? We know the council own. The rest of that percentage will upgrade to those particular assets or lights, securitise the ownership.
Yeah. With the ownership aspect, we are over time. That's exactly what will happen. It is unclear, and it's partly because of the old reserve committee structure that we had. When we look into it, we find that a lot of them were actually jointly funded. So we had both funding from the committee, which is public money, but also from other sources as well, from club fundraising, that sort of thing. So a lot of them, it's really unknown. Sorry, what was the first question too? Sorry.
priority based.
Oh, yes. So, yeah, so priority, with the prioritization, we've looked at a number of different factors, and that includes the sustainability, the performance factors for the light. So that's condition and safety, health and safety, compliance and those sorts of aspects. Also utilization. So that's around the numbers of users and people that can benefit from it. And also demand and capacity factors as well. So that's built into it, where we need it to need additional lighting for, additional capacity, more people training, that sort of thing. And we're also looking at from the funding impact aspect as well, particularly where there's potential to get some alternative funding to help.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to make comment? I'd like some clarification, please, through the terms of reference for B. It recommends that council adopts the outdoor sports lighting policy. And I'm just conscious that in the terms of reference, this committee only has the availability to actually provide advice to council on strategic issues relating to council's infrastructure activities in regards to policy. And we've had this debate before as to the clarity of where policy sits, policy adoptment sits. Is it with the respective subcommittees, or does it have to be referred separately through to council? And reading the terms of reference, I think the Mayor can make a determination, so it might fall into your court with regards to where adoption of an outdoor sports lighting policy arises through these subcommittees.
So if I could just
like to ask.
Yeah, I can answer that one, Deborah. So in terms of this recommendation, is recommended that the committee, this committee recommends to council to adopt sports light policy. So this is a report that we're presenting that gets discussed here at this committee, and we're hoping this committee will then support to be approved at council. That's the way it's written.
Okay. Do you make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. And in terms of, we know that we're going to be reviewing the committees again early in the new year, and I think that there's an opportunity to tidy up as the committees mature to recognise whether policy can be delegated to committees.
Thank you very much. So basically, this committee recommends that council adopts the outdoor lighting policy. So B should actually be recommends that council adopts. Okay, no, that's fine. Would you like to make a comment, Sam, or are you quite happy with this?
Clear explanation. I think at the moment all these discussions happen at the committees, and that's why we head to committees to have the focus on this type of thing. But at the moment, the policy is held by council, and so this will just flow through. Council will approve it based on the discussion that we've had here today if it passes.
Okay, Councillor Lyle.
I'd like to congratulate the writers of the report and move the recommendations.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Shane?
Yes.
No, you've just seconded the. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? None. Carried. Right, now we'll move on to the next report.
Right.
Which is also Mark Brackus.
It is. The Play Active Recreation and Sports Spaces and Places Plan. So this is the second part of the set of plans for council on play, active recreation and sport. This one deals with the spaces and places. The plan that was approved by the Community Services Committee dealt with the people, the relationships, the usage and those sorts of things. So this is a companion document, but this is focused on the actual assets and facilities. So it has a different perspective, but they are seen as companion documents. We worked very closely with community facilities and services people, particularly James' team, to produce this plan. It's been a long time in the coming, and it's been through quite a number of iterations. We went to the previous council twice in workshops, final one to sign off for public consultation, which occurred in December last year. In the ensuing period, we've also gathered a lot of other information about sport and recreation and play, including doing our end of season report or survey for the sports clubs. So that information has also been integrated into the plan. That gives us a really up-to-date sort of picture, particularly around the sports side of things. And we've also been having continuing discussions with regional sports organisations and clubs and other sporting and recreation groups around the district. It has a very, it's been, a very extensive process in preparing it, and we're quite confident that the information that we prepared through this plan gives a really good representation of sport, recreation and play demand in the community. It has we've developed an action plan which sits at the back. As you will have seen reading the report, it's an extensive plan, and it's been prioritised on a sort of time basis. So when's most important to happen, and what can we leave for a little bit longer. It's got a 10-year horizon at this stage to fit in with the current long-term plan process. The idea is that it's an aspirational plan, and through the long-term plan process, the initiatives and actions and projects that have been identified can be considered, and then council can make a decision on whether they support those or not going forward. I think the plan itself is a very comprehensive document, covers all aspects, had a huge amount of input from clubs and organisations, schools, all sorts of groups around the district. So I think it's being put forward for adoption.
Okay, thank you. We have Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for bringing it here. Like I say, it's gone around a few times, and years of work from yourself and others into getting here. So I fully support what's in here. I think the challenge is going to be about how we fund it, and thinking about how the community can afford to do this. I note under your funding implications, there's talk of development contributions, and I suppose I'm interested to hear from Kelvin around what he believes the level of support can be in development contributions towards this. Is it going to end up 50-50, 70-30, or if this is all because of growth, is it closer to 100 around where that sits? But as far as the plan and identifying where we need to go, what our clubs, individuals, families, and providing for the future needs of our community for those that are yet to come here goes, you've done an excellent job. So I really want to say thank you for that and charting a course forward for us to continue to allow play, sport and recreation to be a key part of the ethos of our community.
Development contributions, Sam, each will vary depending on what it is, where it's sitting, and determining on how much was gross. So Mark has done a first draft of that, which I received a couple of days ago. I had a look at last night, which looked quite comprehensive in how that's pulled together. I think the piece we are missing as an organisation, though, is we think about funding in two ways, being developers and ratepayer. What can we do from other sources of funding? And Mark alluded to it before around lighting, that where are the third parties coming to bear? Where are the large organisations, sporting organisations, and their contributions, which we need to focus on a wider funding strategy which incorporates these also.
I can make a
okay, sorry.
Sorry,
Mark.
Yeah, no, just in terms of the development contribution aspect to it, we do have significant sum built up in the particularly in Eastern Selwyn in the account, and a lot of that has been captured for the projects that are in this plan. the growth projects to provide extra capacity for sport and recreation and play. So there is already a significant amount of funding sitting there that's been captured for this work going forward to recognise that the benefits to the growth community.
Elizabeth.
Hi, you might have missed earlier that Phil is the local expert for the performing arts. I'm probably the council expert on equine sports. So I don't want to pick any holes in it, but there are a few things of concern in what you've put here. Obviously for you guys, you've just taken what the community have feedback that they've given you, and I feel like they've sort of thrown themselves as though it's a lolly scramble for money in here. One thing I just want to really point out as well, it's quite a key thing, is that you've got consider equestrian opportunities as shared users of open space, such as to combine bridle paths with walking and cycling connections in rural areas. You cannot have cycling with horses. It's the most incredibly dangerous thing to mix. The other thing that we've found on the tracks, like in the McLean's Island Park, is when we do have walkers, predominantly they have dogs and they want to let them off the lead, which it's nice to do, but those dogs are usually from an urban environment. They're not used to horses, and that's where you lead to attacks and then other dangerous situations. So we've had that situation over Spencer Park, where it used to be a horse riding track along around the edge of the lake. They've now incorporated a mountain bike track right next to the horse track, which has led to some really dangerous incidences. So they just can't be combined. I just want to, iterate how dangerous that is. So you could have them in a space, but they'd have to be completely disconnected. So that's not even crossover tracks. In terms of what some of the people have put through, like Waihora Pony Club, they want to have club rooms renovations. They've also asked about having assistance with rubbish bin collections. My daughter goes to that pony club. The rubbish collection that I see is just a couple of Tim Tam packets at the end of a Sunday afternoon once a month. Like, it's really not something the council needs to concern themselves with. In terms of a lot of the riding facilities that are available, the clubs probably predominantly are reasonably self-serviced. But in terms of the arena upgrades, we did see funding applications come through, because the cost of upgrading an arena sand surface is a little bit expensive and prohibitive for the club fundraising. That might be something wanting to be looked at. I think one of the biggest things that I get out of this, we don't need to be providing cross-country courses or arenas per se. Canterbury's full of them. People can hire them for $10 to $15 themselves. It's not something the council again needs to focus on. But in terms of utilising what open spaces we have, that would be fantastic to have a few more, particularly hill areas, and whether we have to look at what they have in the UK, where you've got a right of access on old farmland, and it's like an old bridle track and the public can access it. That kind of thing would be magic if it's feasible.
Just in response to the particularly some of the things that the pony clubs brought up. So yes, that's the issues that they've raised when they've talked to our consultants. So they've just been recorded in there as an issue that was raised. But certainly when we go through the analysis side of things and look at what sort of things we're going to fund, we're not going to fund those sorts of things that you were talking about. And we haven't indicated that in the plan going forward. We have indicated a need to at least do some more work in planning investigation to support equine activities, because it was quite a strong lobby in terms of being able to do that. And partly that's around safety on riding along roadsides and that sort of thing, perceived unsafe conditions and that sort of thing. And we do have some potential sites coming into the future that could be suitable for some sort of equine activity.
Sophie.
Yeah, I'm happy to move this if there's nobody else anyway, because there's been a lot of work going into it, so that's all cool. I am a wee bit curious about the sports fund, but we already sort of mentioned that might be part of a different review there. So yeah, because it's interesting support. suggesting a fund to support clubs, and then later on in the plan, it shows that actually the number of people who participate in club sports is actually very low. So it's, anyway, it'd be good to find out more information about that in due course. And just to your comment about the whole bridleways type thing, that's a controversial thing even in the UK these days. The right to roam issue is in New Zealand was completely taken away by the whole thing of property rights, as Manawhena would probably advise. Yeah, thank you.
Shane. Okay, sorry. I did have a query on the report that I circulated to you all, and it was around on page 118, section 7, funding implications. The plan prioritises some programs, and we're talking about a capital expenditure of 75, which is in the recommendation for the 10-year plan. But then we also find that there is planning investigation work totaling 845,000, of which only 395 is budgeted. And we also have funding to support clubs on an annual basis at $140,000 per annum. And my response back was that the understanding was that would be set up as a discretionary fund as to how you would distribute that fund. So perhaps it might need to go into a discussion in the the long-term plan as to how we're going to deal with all of these discretionary funds that we've set aside through all the various subcommittees, because they will total up. And at the end of the day, there is a responsibility for strategically clubs that work under different organisations and umbrellas to find that, thanks Kelvin, that third sense of funding with regards to supporting their sport. So just a bit of clarification, planning investigation work, that's almost doubled in the plan. Can you give an update on that, please?
Yeah, when you put it into context, I mean, it's really looking at some of the investigation and planning work that we need just to give us better understanding around needs and capacity and that going forward. And currently this year, as I say, there's just under 400,000 budgeted. Remember, this is a 10-year plan, so over an extra 445,000 over 10 years is $45,000 a year if you average it out. So it's not huge expenditure, but it is, and again, it's subject to investment decision making through the long-term plan process. But it's just indicating that's what we think is needed to be able to get the information that's required to give us further demand and capacity information going forward, so that we can actually plan better. And there's a few plans in there, like indoor court strategies and update of our aquatic facilities strategy, and partly that's around some national work that's being done at the moment, so that we will sort of follow on, tag on from that. But it gives us new benchmarking information for all of that we can start to apply and look at our supply and demand for sport and recreation and play going forward.
Okay.
Just to add to that, I think we're in a unique position where if you're at Timaru or Ashburton or something like that, you don't have the accelerated growth and utilisation of facilities that Selwyn does. We're in a particularly unique position where we do need to review those plans more regularly than perhaps other organisations do, just because of the quick change in demand and growth that we're seeing.
Okay. So I had a mover for this report, Shane, and a seconder was, who moved it? Sophie. And a seconder for Shane. All in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? None. Carried. Now, thanks Andrew for waiting at the back. I'm going to actually bring tab 11 forward before tab 10, so we can actually have a presentation from Andrew on the climate change report from Aqualink. And I'll ask Murray to lead this one.
All right, so as I mentioned at the start, I'd like to welcome Andrew Dark and Nick Dudley Ward to the front here. They are going to present the climatic cycles and trends report, the impacts on infrastructure. So just to let councillors know, we do have a time limit to 3. So we're hoping to bring UA in at the end. So just keep that in mind when we're having questions at the end. If I could be so bold.
I'm just figuring out how to share my screen. Might need some assistance from someone who knows how to drive the Zoom system.
Thanks, Bill.
I see.
That's the time.
I couldn't see it shoot happening. Oh, yeah.
Phase that we're sharing on this side.
Something's happening. It's coming. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name's Andrew Dark and I've got Nick Dudley Ward here with me. I'll pass all the tricky questions to Nick. As Deborah mentioned earlier in her chairperson's report, we did give a brief update on this work to the District Land Drainage Committee in September. That presentation obviously was focused more on the land drainage networks. So this is a more comprehensive update considering all the asset types. Just to give a high-level overview of our approach, we've reviewed historical data sets. We've extended those historical climate records back in time where necessary and filled in gaps so that we can look at trends and cycles in the measured records. We've then moved into interpretation of both national scale and regional scale climate projections for the future. And as part of this project, we have done some modelling of the groundwater system because that's something that isn't specifically covered by the national scale or regional scale projections, but it's obviously something that is of particular importance to this district. And then finally, we've assessed the impacts and risks to water assets, transportation assets, community facilities and open spaces, and we've also considered the impact of non-council assets on SDC's assets. So this is the third one of these assessments that we've done. We started initially in 2016 with an assessment of water infrastructure. That was updated in 2020. At that stage, we updated the historical input time series and the modelling to bring it up to date. This 2023 update has been a little bit different. We've incorporated some of the new climate projections that have come out internationally and some of the national and regional scale interpretation of that. We've started looking out towards the end of the century rather than just limiting ourselves to the mid-century timeframe that we've looked at previously. As I mentioned, we've looked at the full range of asset types rather than just water infrastructure, and we've also mentioned the non-SDC assets. It's worth spending a couple of minutes just digging into why we look at historical data when we're thinking about climate change. The long-term historical records give us information about the variability of the current climate, including extreme events. And there's a significant amount of uncertainty in the projections around future climate. But one thing that those projections are pointing to is an increased frequency of extreme events. So, but by knowing about what's happened in the past with extreme events, we've got a better basis for understanding the future. We can be more informed about the baseline for considering changes. So if we're talking about a 15% increase, we know, what that 15% increase is occurring from. And if we can design infrastructure that can cope with the variability of today's climate, it's more likely that infrastructure will be resilient in the future. So if we can manage those extreme events now, we're in a better position to manage the future. And that this is expressed quite well as kia whakatamori te haere whakamua, or I walk backwards into the future with my eyes fixed on the past. So getting into some of that historic data now, this is a long-term record of temperature from the district. There has been around 1 degree Celsius of warming over the last 100 years. So you can see, if you hold your head the right way, you might be able to see the slight upward trend in the red line. The projection is for a further 0.5 to 1.5 degrees of warming by mid-century, and then 0.5 to 3.5 degrees by late century, depending on the emission scenario. Once you get out to the end of the century, it does become quite uncertain and quite dependent on the emission scenario. The increases for inland areas are projected to be slightly greater. The number of hot days is projected to increase, and the number of frost days is projected to reduce. So just looking at that long time series, the trend over the last 100 years doesn't look particularly dramatic. But if we look at the historical data in a slightly different way, we can illustrate why means or medians don't really tell us the full story. So this is plotting that same data set as a histogram. So it's the frequency of different temperatures occurring over that record. If we then overlay a projected change, we can see that the range of temperatures spreads out. There is a shift to the mean or to the median, but at the right hand end of that plot, you can see that the extremely hot temperatures become more extreme, and very hot days that we would see on a fairly rare basis under the current climate become more frequent. So that's illustrating my earlier point about the importance of extremes. Annual rainfall is not projected to change significantly. The projections range from a 5% decrease to a 5% increase in annual rainfall totals. What is projected to change is the seasonal distribution of that rainfall and the timing of it. So we're expecting more rain to fall over winter, up to 40% more winter rainfall by the end of the century under the high emission scenario. And we're expecting the number of extreme rainfall events to increase. So the plot on the screen there is the historic record of 5-day rainfall totals. So that metric, the 5-day annual rain event, is expected to increase by up to 15%. So we would see more severe rainfall occurring more often under a high warming scenario. Potential evapotranspiration is expected to increase on the Canterbury Plains, particularly in inland areas. So the projection is for an increase of around 1 to 200 millimeters of potential evapotranspiration deficit by the end of the century. On the graph there, we're seeing the impact of the last couple of relatively wet seasons on evapotranspiration, but that projection for an increase to potential evapotranspiration points to greater irrigation demand. So that has a direct impact for SDC in terms of demand for for irrigation on sports fields and any horticultural assets. Also an indirect impact due to increased demand on the groundwater system overall. And of course, that groundwater system is important for water supplies. River flows don't show much of a trend in the historic records. It's probably a bit hard for you to read the labels on the graphs there, but that's the Waimakariri at the top, the Rakaia, the Selwyn, and at the bottom, Doyleson Drain. The projection is for a slight increase to the mean annual flows in the Alpine rivers by mid-century. The greatest increases are projected to occur over winter. Flows in foothills rivers, such as the Selwyn, may decrease slightly. And there is significant uncertainty surrounding the end of century flow regimes. That's all dependent on the emission scenarios. Groundwater is something that isn't really covered by the national or regional scale projections. So we've done some modelling. We've taken the climate inputs and put those into a model of the groundwater system to project forward what might happen in certain wells. So the red lines on the map on the screen slices down the plains that we have modelled. We're able to calibrate that model against long-term measured water levels. So on the graph on the right-hand side, the red dots are the measured water levels. The blue line is our model, which you can see it projects back in time. That's calibrating against the measured record, and then we can look forward in time. So the future projections for groundwater show a relatively small change in water levels on an average basis to the middle of the century. What it does show, both in mid-century and increasingly towards the end of the century, is a change in the extreme water levels. So increasingly low water levels would become lower, and you experience low water levels more frequently. Sea level rise is something that we have seen quite a marked change in the historic record. 14 centimetre rise over the last 60 years, and the data recorded at Littleton. Sea levels are projected to rise by another 90 centimetres by the end of the century under the high emission scenario. So that's the red line on the figure. The blue line is the lower end of the projections given by the Ministry for the Environment. So that gap between the projected pathways really highlights the increasing band of uncertainty as we go out towards 2100. There is a projected increase in extreme sea level events. So storm surges, which can have implications for inundation of coastal land. There's a potential risk of saltwater intrusion and implications for the lake level regime for Te Waihora. And just briefly on some other climate variables, there's projected to be a reduction in the number of snow days, 10 to 25 fewer snow days on an average annual basis in alpine areas, and an increase in wind speeds, so 2 to 10% increase in mean annual wind speed, with the largest increases in winter and spring. And we've seen the effects of wind in Canterbury in the last few days with the El Nino conditions that we're experiencing this summer. Te Waihora is something that we've given some consideration to. It's quite a complex system to consider in terms of what might happen under climate change, because you've got interactions between sea level rise, extreme sea level events, the lake opening regime, the surface water inflows, and the interactions with the groundwater systems. So what we've done is to combine projected sea level rise with observed historic high water levels from an event in 2013, and that gives an indication of future high lake levels. So the top figure on the right there is the indicative extent of inundation from the 2013 high lake level event. The red figure below, although that looks a bit dramatic, it's not actually showing land inundation. That's showing the extent of the predicted backwater effect through the land drainage network with the combination of a high lake level and sea level rise. So it's showing that the effectiveness of the land drainage network would likely be reduced in that scenario. So that those previous slides have summed up the projected changes to the climate and how that ties in with the current climate. Moving on now to how we've done the risk assessment. As you're all aware, the district is very geographically diverse. So we've divided up into 3 geographical zones. So the alpine hills and high country, the plains, and the coastal and lower plains. And this aligns with zoning that's been used for other asset management by council staff. We have also assessed impacts that are common across all of those zones. While our report does consider impacts out to the end of the century, the risk assessment is primarily focused on the mid-century, and that's mainly acknowledging the significant uncertainty around the end of century projections. We held some workshops with asset managers to help establish the impacts and to download the knowledge of the people who are most intimately involved with managing these assets. So I'd like to just acknowledge the inputs of Mark, Yue, Joe, and Murray into that process. And then we've summarised our risk assessment as vulnerability of each asset, the projected change that may impact on it, and then the overall impact. So that can be compared, if you like, to a classical risk assessment framework of risk being consequence times likelihood. So I'm not going to go through all the detailed risk assessment tables that are in the report, but this is just an example of how it's laid out. This is the land drainage assets on the coastal and lower plains. So as you can see, we've got the column showing the environmental factor that may affect that asset, the vulnerability of that asset to changes in that factor, then a summary of the projected impacts of that factor changing and what the magnitude of that change may be, magnitude or direction of change. And then the final right-hand columns are what is the projected likelihood of that impact occurring, and then the overall impact on that asset. Probably also worth pointing out that it's really difficult to compare impacts across, for example, something that's really critical for the district, like community water supplies, against something like impacts on open spaces. So the risk assessment should be considered as relative within each asset type. So the next few slides that I'll take you through summarise some of the headlines, I guess, from each asset type. One of the really common themes across all of these is extreme weather events, extreme rainfall and flooding. So I might sound like a bit of a broken record in that respect. So for potable water networks, extreme weather events are likely to have the greatest impact at mid-century. So extreme rainfall can cause turbidity in surface water intake systems and potentially wellhead security system issues for groundwater supply systems. At the other end of the spectrum, drought can cause increased demand and reduce supply reliability. The impacts of changes to the groundwater system are likely to be relatively small mid-century, but increasing towards the end of the century. Again, that is highly dependent on the emission scenario. There are some potential benefits from less snow and ice in terms of less damage to assets by freezing conditions and easier winter access to assets, particularly in the high country. Wastewater is also been so for wastewater, extreme rainfall has been assessed as having the highest impact due to network inflows. Increased temperature is a bit of a double-edged sword. There are potential odor issues, but also potentially increased process efficiency. There's potential benefits for wastewater disposal from more frequent drought, where you're needing to irrigate treated wastewater to land. So increased drought and improves the capacity to do that. Sea level rise could potentially impact on lowland wastewater disposal sites, and there's an unquantified interaction with the shallow groundwater system that we believe needs further investigation. Stormwater, again, extreme rainfall, surface flooding and the capacity of the network are some of the headline issues there. With increasing temperature, there is potential ecological impact with the wetland stormwater management systems. Reduced snow and ice could be a potential benefit for reduced meltwater inflows in some of the high country systems. And again, sea level rise coupled with shallow groundwater, there's potentially a reduction in infiltration capacity in some of the lowland settlements. For land drainage, the highest risks are around occurrence of more extreme weather events. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm becoming a bit of a broken record with talking about extreme rainfall and flooding. Groundwater impacts may be relatively small. There could be an impact on the Arthur's Pass flood protection scheme, which is part of the land drainage networks. Sea level rise, as I mentioned earlier, coupled with the management of Te Waihora, could cause backwater effects up through the land drainage networks. For water races, increased temperatures and drought are likely to result in higher demand for stock water. That greater flow variability in the alpine rivers with more of the flow occurring over winter could lead to reduced supply reliability for water races, both in terms of low flows and with greater occurrence of flood events. There could be more flood shutdowns and increased risk of damage to intakes. And again, extreme rainfall can impact on the water race network, issues with surface flooding and so on. So this table summarizes the risks to the Five Waters assets. I won't labour the point any further, but extreme rainfall is the biggest item there. Moving on to transportation assets. Increased hot days can lead to road surface degradation. With the increased flooding and increased rainfall and increased flooding in alpine and foothills rivers, there's potential for bridge and bridge abutment damage, increased closures of fords and damage to those fords, damage to the road surfaces themselves, and potential for slips and culvert blockage. There is some potential for inundation of coastal roads due to sea level rise and extreme sea level events, but the exposure to that is relatively limited. Moving on to community facilities. Temperature was identified as potentially having an effect on heating, ventilation and air conditioning systems and other air handling systems in council buildings, both in terms of how those systems operate and the energy cost implications. And also the longevity of the building envelopes, the coatings, claddings, roofing materials being exposed to higher temperatures more often. The increase in wind speeds and increase of extreme wind events can also have an impact on those ventilation and air conditioning systems, and there's potential for damage to structures from extreme wind. Extreme rainfall and flooding, again, has an impact on community facilities. There's potential for floodwaters to enter buildings. One interesting aspect here is the access to buildings that are required for emergency response, and also the impacts on the building envelope, so roof leaks under extreme rainfall and the longevity of building materials. For open spaces, we divided this up into developed open spaces and natural open spaces. So for the developed spaces, so parks and gardens and so on, increased temperature or increased number of hot days leads to increased water demand for park and garden irrigation. Also, interestingly, it was identified that there could be an increased demand for mowing of parks over winter with fewer frosts occurring. Increased drought, there's fire risk, difficulty in establishing new planting, and potential loss of some existing tree canopy. Wind, again, there's the potential for damage to trees and structures. And with extreme rainfall, there's potential for surface flooding, leading to reduced opportunities to use playing fields, damage to things like tracks and footbridges. And it was also identified that there could be issues that fall within council's responsibility for safe evacuation of people who are occupying campsites on council land. Sea level rise could cause an inundation of some council-owned open spaces, and also issues with wastewater and water supplies at council facilities that aren't connected to the reticulated networks. For the natural open spaces, a key thing was potential loss of biodiversity and the potential for invasive weed species to establish themselves with increased temperature. Wind could see damage to forest crops with wind throw occurring. And similarly to the developed open spaces, there's potential for damage to tracks and footbridges, and the need to try and evacuate people from those areas during extreme weather. So this table sums up the impacts across transportation and community facilities and open spaces. The headline items are really similar to the water assets, with extreme rainfall being a high risk across all zones and across all water asset types. Increased temperature and wind are also the high risk items for these asset categories. So as I mentioned earlier, we did give some consideration to potential impacts on SDC assets from non-council assets. So the non-council assets within the district are obviously exposed to the same physical risks as council's assets. And there are some fairly substantial pieces of infrastructure within the district, such as the ECAN stop banks on the Waimakariri, the Central Plains Water Head Race, Orion's electricity network, and the state highways and rail network. So with the stop banks and the head race, there's potential for those to fail and cause flooding. The electricity network, obviously, if power poles are blown over or taken out by slips, there's potential for road blockages. There's also the aspect of the power supply to SDC's infrastructure, such as pump stations. With the state highways and the rail network, there's potential that if those are damaged, then that puts increased pressure on SDC's local road network, which may itself be damaged in an extreme weather event. As I've mentioned quite a few times through this, the uncertainty increases considerably as we move beyond the middle of the century. There are some recent global observations that indicate that we may be on a more accelerated warming pathway. And the figure on the screen there is some data from the NASA Earth Observatory showing the temperature anomaly right up to September 2023. And the last month really sticks out there as a step change. I think this is something that's still puzzling climate scientists, and there's starting to be a bit of chatter about whether we have reached some tipping points, but it's really too soon to say anything really conclusive about that. There is a cascading impact of increasing temperature on other climate variables. So if we are on a more accelerated warming pathway, that has implications for warmer air holding more moisture, which leads to more extreme rainfall and so on. The uncertainty regarding impacts on the groundwater system is particularly high due to the number of processes that need to be modelled to assess the impact. So to go from the climate projections to actually understand what might happen in a particular water supply well, we need to take the rainfall and the potential evapotranspiration, model the land surface recharge to the groundwater system, then model how the groundwater system responds, and then analyse what the effect is on the water levels. So there's quite a long chain of processes there that need to be considered that all stacks up to increasing uncertainty. So our key recommendations coming out of this is that the rate of change may be accelerating. So don't put this on the shelf for 3 years. Keep thinking about it. Focus on adaptation in addition to impact. We think it is worthwhile to give the groundwater systems and their interaction with the coastal boundary some more consideration. It's a complex system. The observations are quite sparse. You're relying on monitoring wells that are dotted around that may have some water level measurements taken, and the system responds slowly, so you have less chance to observe changes. So we think it is worth focusing on understanding the impacts of sea level rise on groundwater, particularly in the lower plains and coastal area. So that's the conclusion of the climate change work. Murray asked me to also give a brief verbal update on some work that we've been doing in relation to stormwater disposal from Rolleston, addressing the concerns that Rolleston stormwater disposal as the town has grown may be having an impact on groundwater levels and and on the land drainage networks. So we have been doing some work on that, which is in draft at present. We've looked at the water balance. So if we draw a boundary around the full extent of Rolleston and assess what has changed over time as the extent of the urban area has changed, and land has gone from being either dry land or irrigated agricultural land to urban land with a greater proportion of hard surface that's draining directly into stormwater systems then soaking to ground. So that water balance analysis has indicated that under the recent expansion over the last 10 or so years, there is a greater volume of water going into the ground around the Rolleston area. The key factor there, I think, is that there's less water being discharged to pasture areas where it can be stored in the soil and taken up by plants. So a stormwater soakage system is obviously designed to get water into the ground as soon as possible, so you're creating a more rapid pathway for that stormwater runoff. We have looked at the trends in groundwater and measured groundwater levels. Shallow bores down gradient of Rolleston do show a slight increasing groundwater level trend that is not present in bores that are adjacent to but not down gradient of Rolleston. There is a relatively limited amount of data to look at, so we need to treat that conclusion with a wee bit of caution. We have looked at the short-term water level response, based on sub-daily rainfall and sub-daily groundwater levels, and you can see that where you have a succession of rainfall events that obviously are filling up the capacity of the soil and the shallow groundwater system, you do seem to reach a point where you do see quite a rapid response in the groundwater levels following rainfall. So that could be an impact of the stormwater disposal, but it is also very difficult to isolate that from everything else that's going on the plains. We've done some analytical modelling of the potential response to the response in the groundwater system from disposing of the volume of water that we've assessed as coming from the Rolleston stormwater system, and that initial analytical modelling shows that you would see a response in the groundwater system from disposing of that volume. So I guess the headline message from that work is that there are some things pointing to this being an issue, but it's really hard to isolate Rolleston as being the sole cause.
I have. I can't remember which page it was on, but you had one where it was the increase of sea levels. And I noticed that the trajectory was like this, and then suddenly it hit 2022 and it went like that. So you had two there, but they were like an extreme off the usual trajectory. I haven't usually seen that sort of modelling in science before. So could you explain why it had a sudden increase at that point?
So we've taken the measured data from Littleton, and then from present day, that figure was showing a straight line increase between the projected increase and the current level. So it may not be a straight line. It may be an accelerating change, but we just don't know at this point.
It's predictive modelling then.
Well, they come out of the IPCC reports on sea level rise and the sort of national projections on what will happen under different climate futures.
Is that the recently redone IPCC report, or the one that was contested a while ago?
It would have come out of AR6, which is the most recent one. And that, yeah, and in the New Zealand context, the sort of government's given that sort of advice on how you use both AR5 and AR6. They're broadly consistent, in fact, with the sort of level of sea level rise that we're expecting over the next century. But it is very, very dependent on the emissions scenario and the rate of warming.
Sorry, on from that, also Lake Waihora, you've shown the red graph where if it expands when the sea level rises. From what I can understand from the plains, it comes right up to where we are in Rolleston, correct? So the plains is from that region all the way up through to here?
The red shaded area that I had on that slide was showing the extent to which an increased lake level would affect the land drainage network. So we're not saying that the lake level would come that far up, but once you increase the lake level to a certain level, then the land drainage network's back up behind that. Yeah. So you're increasing you're decreasing the effectiveness of the land drainage network quite a bit further inland from where the actual lake level would be.
Okay. So will the same effect happen if the lake is no longer dug out as it is regularly in the winter to release it into the ocean? So would we, if we stop doing that, we would get the same likelihood of what you've got on the red map as well?
Probably not to the same extent, because that scenario that we've looked at considers both an extremely high lake with sea level rise superimposed on that.
I'm just conscious of time of where we're sitting on the agenda, and this has been a really, really comprehensive report, and I'm sure that it will be discussed in other mediums when we actually have reporting for asset infrastructure. So thanks very much for bringing it forward to us, and I'd like now if we could go and look at tab 10 on our agenda, which is the Prebbleton to City Cycle Commuter Link. So thank you very much. Thanks, Yue, for coming and presenting to us at council. I believe this is your first time.
Yes.
Look, I'm told that I must go just cautiously on you. So please present your report, highlight the issues, take it as read from the rest of the councillors, and then we just may have some questions to answer.
Sure. Thank you.
You.
Kia ora. This report is on a transportation item in the 23-24 annual plan. Compared to other transportation projects, this project is a little bit different in terms of its funding pathway and also some design constraint. So I have put those into this brief 4-page report, and I'll take that report as being read, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions on this report? Given that it is asking for the withdrawal of a project that we actually currently have in our new long-term plan, because of change, as I'm reading it correctly, change in government direction, and also a massive change in the budget from 500,000 K to 2.2 million.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other further questions around Luan? Sam.
Well, I mean, just when I read this, I was a bit sad actually. I support the increase in the ability of people not drive to be able to get around places that they need to. It's reasonably short distance to link onto an existing network. And I completely understand why we're doing it and support the direction that the report's asking us to take. But this sort of just highlights the challenge I think we're going to have as we work through our long-term plan, where projects that we've wanted and liked and might thought were going to happen in a couple of years' time will be squeezed and may or may not be able to be in our future work program in the years where we'd expected them. So thank you for highlighting the problems with it and bringing the report to us.
Okay, just conscious of time, Shane.
Oh, yeah, just quickly, is it being completely withdrawn and scrapped, or is it being shelved potentially for the future?
Yeah, I think this is a project that could be considered in the long-term plan. The issue of this one is that we had a design solution which was the cheaper price. Waka Kotahi have gone through with their processes to see we actually want a separated footpath, which is added the cost. So we could consider it'll be cheaper for us to actually build what we wanted at the start without the funding than to add additional funding to meet their requirements.
Right, Sophie.
Yep, basically the same sort of thing. If taking it out, which is disappointing, but if it makes the others more feasible, I'd rather have two than none. And also, I mean, this Prebbleton to the city, there is an existing link onto the CMS2, CSM2 pathway. It's not direct, but it does exist. So it's not like you're completely blocked off.
Do I have a mover and a seconder for the report if no one else wants to speak on this matter? Sam and Bob? All in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? None. Carried. That now ends the public portion of our subcommittee meeting today. And thanks for the public that have taken the time to listen. And we will now close off because can I have a resolution to move into public excluded? Sophie, Nicole, all in favour say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. Right, someone's got to disconnect the public. Wait.